Hello there, BookTube. My name is Daniel. Welcome back to my channel, Guilty Feet. Kieran, this one's for you. I've got no rhythm. And today I'm going to do a review of a book, a single book that I read this last week, which I think anyone else who was going to read it probably has already, and it was reviewed quite heavily when it was published, because I'm talking about Amor Towles, the Towles, I think, like you dry your feet with, the Lincoln Highway. This is his third novel. I didn't read his first one, which is Rules of Civility. I've heard good things. I did read A Gentleman in Moscow, which I resisted for the longest time because lots of people said it was great, and that's sort of, well, if everyone says it's great, then I don't want to. Anyway, I ended up buying it, read it, loved it. My wife reminded me that she read it, also loved it. I got this in paperback. This is published by Windmill in paperback in the UK. I don't know. Windmill is part of Penguin. For some reason, the binding on this paperback edition was terrible, so I've actually got a loose page. So I buy a lot of secondhand books, but when I buy new books, often after I've read them, they appear to be mostly unread because I'm very gentle with books. I don't take them into the bath. I use bookmarks and things. But this book, for some reason, you can see there, has got some loose pages, so I think it's the binding. So that's my biggest complaint about A Gentleman in Moscow, because as a read it was just a dream. It whizzed through. There's something about his writing which just takes you from sentence to sentence, to page. This was sort of quite low stakes, quite genteel, but also wise and witty, and charming is now such a cliche, and I feel like I've used it a lot for books recently, but Gentleman in Moscow just worked for me. It wasn't just that it was charming and cozy, it was also kind of smart. Having resisted and then given in on that, I kind of resisted Lincoln Highway when it came out because I knew it was big. This is 550 pages more, 570 pages long, and I know this is terrible. I read books that are. I just read this book, which is 570 pages long, but it's a lot. There's a lot to commit to. So I kind of put it off, and then I needed some books to make up an order to get the free shipping, and I threw this in hardback from the US. I had the ship to Israel last July, and then sort of put off reading it for a bit, and only just now I'm still catching up. I've done all the hauls I'm going to do. I've got 5 new books coming this weekend from my friend the pilot in the UK, but that's it with me buying books for the longest time, although I really, really hope someone buys me the new Salman Rushdie. But that's me buying books. I've got 100 books or so on my TBR, and I really need to dig into them. And this was part of that, trying to read the novels that I bought. Anyway, read this in the last week. I read like 100 pages of it, and then a couple of days I wasn't reading, and I was coming to the weekend, and I always get a lot of reading done on Shabbat, because I don't do anything. I don't use my phone. We don't have anything else. So Shabbat is a great time for me to dig in. But I still had like 450 pages to go when I sat down to read this on Friday night. Except it was such a breezy read that I ended up finishing it on Friday night. That is to say, from about 8 o'clock in the evening after we finished supper, sitting out here on the couch, and then going and reading in the bed where I have a side light on that I can close off without extinguishing electricity. It's called a Shabbos lamp, so it's good for people who are Sabbath observant. They can still have a reading light in bed without interacting with electricity, and end up finishing this before midnight. So read it much faster than I usually give around. And 60 pages an hour is kind of what I think I'm reading. That's my reading pace on most, and that's when I'm sitting down reading 2 hours, I expect to read 120 pages. And obviously that's tougher in a dense read, and in a breezy sort of detective or light sort of pulpy thing, it can go a little bit faster. But this, as a literary novel, I absolutely sail through it. It's not because it's got super short chapters or lots of big white space on pages. It was perfectly normal, so the dialogue there, yes, okay, there's a page with dialogues, there's some white space, but there's something about the way Towles writes which just breezes. It just flies past your eyes. Okay, let's talk about the book itself. I was a little concerned at the beginning. We have our protagonist, Emmett, is on his way home from a stay in a sort of boys' prison reformatory. So he's 18 years old. Something terrible has happened. something he regrets bitterly. He's done his time for this crime, and he's on his way home. His father has since passed away. He's in a farm somewhere in Nebraska, I believe. Is that right? Hold on 1 second. Yes, Nebraska. That's what happens when you die yourself. He's on his way home. He has an 8-year-old brother who's been staying with the neighbors. The father has died. The house has been defaulted on, and it is expressed to Emmett that this may not be the best place for him to make a new start, given his history in the town. He has a car, which he bought before he went to prison, and now he and the car and his 8-year-old brother Billy are going to take off and start a new life somewhere. They have different ideas about where they're going to go and which direction, but it's a great setup for the novel. And then 2 other people turn up. 2 people who turn up who were in the prison with Billy. So they're also young. These are this was a prison for young offenders, so 18, 19 years old, and they have escaped from the prison in the warden's car that dropped Billy off. And now they're here, and they have some ideas that same prison as Emmett. Emmett is the older brother, and they have some ideas that they would like Emmett to join them with. They were all friends, and they lived together, they dormed together in prison, and now they have schemes. One of them is Duchess. That's his name, and he was a character that made me feel a little bit nervous, just because this was sort of already under 100 pages into the book, and you felt that this was the character that was always going to get in the way of Emmett's dreams. Emmett, who is a sort of unusually a decent fellow, despite the things that happened, and wanting to do good and wanting to start his life right and wanting to care for his little brother Billy, and you just felt that Duchess was going to fuck it all up, and knowing that I had 500 pages, 450 pages left of the book, with that Duchess character hanging around, he's the kind of person in stories, whether films or books or anything, where you just think nothing good will happen while he is still there. He needs to be dealt with sooner rather than later, because he is the source of all problems. He is a plot point as much as a character, because without him, none of the dilemmas are going to occur out of which Emmett must extract him and Billy. And so it starts off that Duchess is very much that plot point. He doesn't get dealt with early on, so he remains a figure and a POV character. So each of the chapters is named for a different character. That character is not always POV. So in the chapters named for Emmett, it's not that Emmett is talking in the first person, but it's kind of told from Emmett's point of view. He's the character we're following for most of that. In the Duchess chapters, Duchess, I think, is the first person narrator. So it's Towles' way of making sure that Duchess is more than just a plot point, that he has some character, he has a background, he has real motivation, and he's the driver of the plot for much of it, even though we align ourselves with Emmett and Billy and the desire to do good. Without Duchess, there is no 550-page novel. The journey on the Lincoln Highway goes in a different direction, literally in a different direction than it would if it was just Emmett and Billy starting their life. So a lot of plot. Things happen. Some things happen that were more anxiety-inducing than others. When Emmett goes off to look for food, and 8-year-old Billy is left behind, and someone finds him and approaches him and is about to do him harm, but things happen. Billy is an odd little sort of 8-year-old, because he's perfect, brilliantly intelligent, asks all the right questions, is endlessly optimistic. Even when bad things happen, he manages to find his way out of things. At a crucial point at the end of the book, when everyone reaches an impasse, there's no way they don't know how to get past an obstacle. Billy solves it in about 5 seconds, because he's a brilliant. He's just one of those brilliant child characters that makes no sense and can't possibly exist in the real world, because he knows everything. He's always sweet and kind and generous towards people, even the bad people. He wants to think good of them, and that's Billy. So there's, you could pull this apart, and there's lots to pull it apart. The ending, I guess, left me a little nonplussed and weirded out, but it's about a journey, as that word highway in the title suggests. And the journey is mostly entertaining. Those low levels of concern that I had about Duchess fucking it up for everybody, yeah, that kind of plays out, but could always be worse, I guess, even though some bad things happen. Just, yeah, I think if I was a real critic, I might pull this apart and say this was sort of weak and didn't have most of the charm that Gentleman in Moscow showed. But it's it's okay. It's good. It's a good read if you like reading 550-page novels, and there are a lot of people who do. Let's put it that way. I'm trying to read 100 plus books a year, and if I get stuck in a 600-page novel that slows me down because I'm not enjoying it, then that can be a problem for me. Or if I read an 150-page novella and it just reads through and I can read 3 of those in a week, I'm thrilled. But there are people who read fewer books a year, for which being able to sink their teeth into something like this is an absolute treat. And I would say that is still true. If that's what you read, if you like a big, chunky, readable, accessible, a thrill to cast your eyes upon, and as you get to the end of the sentence, you're excited about the next one and where it's going. You get to the end of the chapter, you want to know what's going to happen to those characters, even though we're switching POV now. We're going to come back and find out what happened, or we're going to see it from someone else's angle. All of it's good. It's just well constructed, perhaps not psychologically sophisticated, but in terms of storytelling, it's well constructed, well edited, reasonably well paced. I would say not quite as gold as A Gentleman in Moscow, but better paced than so many other books that we read and just say, yeah, I could have done with 100 pages less, or they really didn't know what they were doing with that, and sort of I would say this is a mostly successful 21st century literary fiction novel that you could buy in a supermarket or in a highbrow bookshop, and you'd come home and you read this and you go, yeah, that's okay. That was The Lincoln Highway by Amor Towles. So take that for what it is. If that's something that interests you, I think this will work. If you want to be sniffy about things, plenty to be sniffy about here. But why? I'm sniffy about so many things that I read that I don't enjoy. This, I whizzed through most of it. I'd say 450 pages I read in about 4.5 hours, which is a very fast-paced, breezy, fun read. And I didn't have that sort of sinking, nervous feeling throughout the whole thing. It just sails by. Thank you. Amor Towles, Lincoln Highway. Hope you like it. Bye.